The midday sun beat down on the pavement as a woman walked slowly down the main avenue of the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Her name was Lucia, and she was wearing a worn blue uniform, bleach-stained white sneakers, and an old backpack slung over her shoulder. She had just finished her shift cleaning offices and was now heading to her second job of the day. The people who passed by her were dressed in expensive suits, carrying designer bags, and talking on high-end phones. Lucia kept her gaze lowered, accustomed to going unnoticed. To the world, she was invisible. Just one more among the many women who worked silently, keeping the spaces clean for those who were seen. She walked 2 more blocks until she came across an imposing corporate building with tinted windows and revolving doors. It was the most important business tower in the area. Lucia sighed deeply before entering. She knew this place wasn't like the others. They treated her worse here. As she walked through the door, the air conditioning hit her in the face. The lobby was immense, with shiny marble floors, giant decorative plants, and a reception desk where 3 impeccably dressed women served guests with perfect smiles. But those smiles disappeared when they saw her. Lucia headed for the service elevator, located in a secluded corner. While she waited, she felt the stares. She always felt them. An elderly woman passing by wrinkled her nose as if Lucia smelled bad. A man in a suit swerved to avoid brushing against her. She pressed her lips together and lowered her gaze. The elevator opened, and inside was a young man leaning against the wall. He had dark skin, somewhat disheveled black hair, and was wearing a wrinkled white shirt with simple dark pants. He didn't look like a manager, nor did he look like a maintenance worker. Lucia hesitated for a second, but entered anyway. The man smiled slightly at her. She didn't respond. They both walked silently up to the 12th floor. When the doors opened, Lucia quickly exited the hall and walked down the hall to the cleaning room. She packed her backpack, took out her shopping cart, and began her routine. She had 20 offices to clean before 6 in the evening. The first office was empty. She wiped down the desk, mopped the furniture, and vacuumed the carpet. In the second, 2 men were talking. They didn't even look at her when she entered. She continued working like a ghost. In the third, a woman was talking on the phone, and when Lucia tried to wipe down the desk, the woman snapped her fingers, signaling her to wait outside. So the afternoon passed, invisible, ignored, treated as if she didn't exist. Around 5 o'clock, Lucia was cleaning an empty conference room when she heard voices in the hallway. She recognized one of them. It was the building supervisor, Mr. Marquez, a fat man with a thin mustache who always looked at her with disdain. "I don't understand why they keep hiring these people," Marquez said loudly. "They can barely read. They're slow, and they always have that victim face." Lucia clutched the rag in her hand. It wasn't the first time she'd heard comments like that, but they still hurt. "I think they should use machines," another voice replied. "It would be more efficient, and we wouldn't have to deal with them." Laughter. Then silence. Lucia swallowed and continued cleaning. When she finished that room, she went out into the hallway and almost collided with someone. It was the same dark-skinned man from the elevator. He was standing near a window looking out onto the street. When he saw her, he stepped aside. "Sorry," he said softly. Lucia blinked in surprise. No one apologized to her, not even when they pushed her. "No problem," he muttered and continued walking. The man watched her walk away with a thoughtful expression. 2 hours later, Lucia finished her shift. She put everything away in the cleaning room, washed her hands, and left the building exhausted. Outside, it was already getting dark. She walked to the bus stop and sat on the cold metal bench. Her knees and back ached. While waiting, he took out his old phone to check the time. There were 15 minutes left until his bus arrived. He sighed and closed his eyes for a moment. "Are you waiting for the bus too?" She opened her eyes with a start. It was the dark-haired man again. He was standing in front of her with his hands in his pockets. "Yes," Lucia replied somewhat uncomfortably. "Can I sit down?" She nodded, not understanding why he was asking. He sat down, leaving space between them. "My name is Mateo," he said, extending his hand. Lucia looked at her strangely but finally shook her hand. "Lucia. Nice to meet you, Lucia." There was an awkward silence. Lucia didn't know what to say. Men didn't usually talk to her on the street unless they wanted something. "I work in the building," Mateo explained as if reading her mind. Well, I started recently. I'm in the technical maintenance department. Lucia nodded slightly. That explained her simple clothing. And you? He asked. Cleaning. Ah, Matteo smiled. I work hard. She glanced at him. There was no mockery in his tone. It seemed genuine. Yes, quite a lot, he admitted. How long have you been working there? 3 years. Do you like it? Lucia almost laughed. No, but it pays the bills. Matteo nodded understandingly. I understand. I'm there out of necessity too. Although I honestly believe no job should feel like such a burden. Those words resonated with Lucia. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as if her opinion mattered. The bus arrived and they both got on. Matteo paid his fare and sat a few rows behind Lucia. She wondered if she would see him again. Over the next few days, Matteo and Lucia ran into each other several times. In the elevator, in the hallways, at the bus stop. Little by little, they began to talk more. Matteo told her he was coming from another city looking for better opportunities. Lucia told him she lived with her sick mother and younger sister. Is your mom okay? Matteo asked one afternoon as they waited for the bus. Not much. He has advanced diabetes. He needs expensive insulin and treatments we can't afford. Very sorry. Lucia shrugged, trying not to break down. It is what it is. Matteo looked at her with genuine sadness. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a bag of bread. Here. I bought too much for lunch. Lucia shook her head. I can't accept it. Please. I don't like wasting food. She hesitated but finally agreed. Thank you. You are welcome. That night, Lucia arrived home to a small 2-room apartment in a poor neighborhood. Her mother was sitting on the old couch watching television, while her 16-year-old sister, Andrea, was working at the table. Hi, Mommy, Lucia greeted, kissing her forehead. Daughter, you're late. Yes, a lot of work. Did you bring anything to eat? Lucia showed the bag of bread. A friend gave me this. His mother smiled weakly. What good people. While they ate bread and tea, Lucia thought about Matteo. It was strange. In 3 years, no one in the building had given her anything, not even a smile. But this dark-skinned man in simple clothes treated her with respect, as if she were someone. The next morning, Lucia arrived at the building early. She took the service elevator and began her routine. Mid-morning, while cleaning a women's restroom, she heard loud voices outside. That guy shouldn't be here, someone shouted. Lucia peeked cautiously. It was Mr. Marquez yelling at Matteo in the middle of the hallway. Sir, I was just checking the network cables as requested, Matteo explained calmly. I don't care, your area is the basement. Up here are the executive offices. I don't want to see you lurking around. I understand, but the crash report indicated. Don't argue with me, Marquez interrupted him abruptly. If I see you around here again, I'll kick you out. People like you don't understand limits. Matteo clenched his jaw but didn't respond. He simply nodded and left. Lucia felt rage. She knew that humiliation. She lived it every day. When Marquez left, she left the bathroom and looked for Matteo. She found him on the emergency stairs, sitting on a step with his head in his hands. Are you okay? Asked Lucia, sitting next to him. Matteo looked up in surprise. Yeah, just tired. Marquez is an idiot. Don't pay attention to him. Matteo smiled slightly. Thanks. I know. Me too. They looked at each other for a moment, sharing that silent pain. Then Matteo took a deep breath. You know what? Someday things are going to change. I don't know when or how, but they will. Lucia wanted to believe him. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue seeing inspiring stories like this one. Weeks passed, and Matteo and Lucia became close friends. They would have lunch together in a nearby park, sharing humble food and deep conversations. Matteo spoke about social justice philosophy and his dreams of changing the world. Lucia listened, fascinated. She had never met anyone like him. Why do you work in maintenance if you think that way? Lucia asked one day. Matteo smiled mysteriously. Because sometimes you need to be in the right place to do the right thing. She didn't understand, but she didn't insist. One afternoon, Lucia received a call that changed everything. Her mother had collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital. Lucia ran out of the building without warning, without changing into anything. She arrived at the hospital, crying and shaking. Your mother needs urgent surgery, the doctor told him seriously. She has a serious foot infection caused by diabetes. If we don't operate today, she'll lose her leg. Or worse. How much does it cost? Lucia asked in a broken voice. The doctor showed him a budget. It was an impossible figure. It was equivalent to 6 months of his salary. I don't have that money, Lucia said desperately. Please, there has to be another way. I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't proceed without payment. Lucia collapsed in the hospital hallway. Her sister Andrea arrived shortly after, and they both cried, hugging each other, not knowing what to do. That night, Lucia tried to get loans. She called relatives. She looked for help on social media. Nothing worked. No one had that kind of money. And banks wouldn't lend her money without collateral. The next morning, she returned to work like a zombie. Her eyes were swollen and her soul broken. She ran into Matteo in the elevator. What happened? He asked when he saw her. Lucia couldn't contain herself. She told him everything between sobs, the surgery, the money, the desperation. Matteo listened to her in silence. Then he hugged her. Calm down. Everything's going to be okay. No, Matteo. Not this time. My mom is going to die. He's not going to die, I promise. Lucia didn't understand how he could promise her that. That same afternoon, while Lucia was cleaning offices, her phone rang. It was the hospital. Mrs. Lucia, your mother has already had surgery. Everything went well. What? Lucia almost screamed. What? I didn't pay. An anonymous donor covered all expenses, including medication and recovery. Lucia was speechless. Then she began to cry. This time out of relief, out of gratitude, out of confusion. Who was it? He asked. We don't know. He just left a message to take good care of his mother. When she hung up, Lucia fell to her knees in the middle of the empty office and thanked God, or the universe, or whoever performed that miracle. Days later, her mother was recovering well. Lucia returned to work feeling lighter. She told Matteo what had happened. How incredible, he said, smiling. There are still good people in the world. Yes, I wish I could thank you personally. Matteo simply nodded. A month later, something strange happened. Lucia arrived at the building and noticed unusual movement. There were security personnel checking documents. Employees were murmuring nervously. Something was happening. What's wrong? He asked a fellow cleaner. They say the owners have changed. The tower has been bought. For whom? I don't know. Someone very rich, they say. Lucia continued working without giving it any importance. Changes in ownership never affected people like her. They always remained invisible. But mid-morning, all the employees were summoned to a meeting in the main auditorium. Lucia walked out, confused along with hundreds of workers, executives, secretaries, maintenance staff, security guards. Everyone was there. The stage was empty until a figure stepped onto the stage. Lucia squinted, trying to get a better look from the back. It was Matthew, but not the Matteo she knew. This Matteo wore an impeccable navy blue suit. His hair was perfectly combed. He wore a luxury watch, and he walked with an authority he'd never displayed before. Good morning, Matteo said in a firm voice that resonated through the microphone. My name is Matteo Villanueva, and as of today, I am the new owner of this building. A murmur ran through the auditorium. Lucia felt the floor shift beneath her feet. I know many are surprised, Matteo continued, but let me explain. 2 months ago, I arrived here posing as a maintenance worker. It wasn't a joke, it was a test. The murmur grew louder. Lucia couldn't breathe. I wanted to see how people behaved when they thought I was just another one of them. Someone without power, without money, without importance. And what I saw deeply disappointed me. Matteo paused. His gaze scanned the auditorium until he found Lucia at the back. Their eyes met for a second. I saw abuse. I saw contempt. I saw people being treated like garbage just because they cleaned floors or fixed wires. I saw managers humiliating employees. I saw indifference, cruelty, and it all ends today. The tension was palpable. As of now, the following are dismissed. Mr. Marquez, maintenance supervisor, Ms. Cordero, human resources manager, and the coordinators of floors 8 through 12. They have 1 hour to vacate their offices. Shouts, protests. Marquez stood up, red-faced with fury. This is ridiculous. You can't fire us like this. I can, and I will, Matteo replied coldly. You abused your power. You humiliated vulnerable people. And there's no place for that in my company. Security escorted the dismissed guests out. The auditorium fell into tense silence. Now, Mateo continued in a softer tone, I want to recognize someone special. Lucia Torres, please come up on stage. Lucia felt like she was dying. Everyone turned to look at her. Her companion gave her a gentle push. On shaky legs, Lucia walked forward. She climbed the stairs and stood in front of Mateo. He smiled at her warmly. Lucia has been working here for 3 years, Mateo said, looking out at the audience. She cleans offices. She comes in early. She leaves late. And she's never, ever received any recognition until today. Lucia didn't understand what was happening. When I posed as an employee, Lucia was the only one who treated me with respect. She spoke to me as an equal. She shared her food with me. She comforted me when I was humiliated. She didn't know who I was. She just saw a human being. Tears rolled down Lucia's cheeks. That's why, as of today, Lucia Torres is the new operations manager of this building, with a salary to match, a company car, and a special bonus of $100,000. The audience erupted in applause. Lucia covered her face, crying uncontrollably. Mateo hugged her. Thank you for your kindness, he whispered in her ear. You restored my faith in humanity. Lucia couldn't speak. She just cried and hugged this man who turned out to be her angel. After the meeting, Mateo took Lucia to her new office. It was huge, with a panoramic view, wooden desk, leather chair. I can't accept this, Lucia said, still in shock. I don't know how to do this job. You'll learn, and you'll have all the support you need. Why me, Mateo? He sat down across from her. Because money doesn't change people. It only reveals who they really are. And you, Lucia, are genuinely good. She shook her head. I didn't do anything special. I was just being nice. Exactly. Kindness is revolutionary in a cruel world. Lucia smiled through tears. By the way, Mateo added, I was the one who paid for your mom's surgery. Lucia's eyes widened. What? When you told me about her, I knew I had to help. Your family didn't deserve that suffering. Lucia threw herself at him again. Thank you. Thank you. I have no words. You don't need to have them. The following months were transformative. Lucia learned quickly. She proved to be organized, fair, and efficient. Employees respected her because she treated them well. She implemented new policies, decent breaks, fair wages, and mandatory respect at all levels. Mateo always supported her. They worked together almost every day, and over time their friendship grew into something more. One evening, after a meeting, Mateo invited her to dinner. As friends? Lucia asked nervously. I'll eat something else if you want, she smiled. I want to. Their relationship blossomed naturally. Mateo never made her feel inferior. He never treated her differently because of her past. To him, Lucia was perfect just the way she was. 6 months later, during a romantic dinner at an elegant restaurant, Mateo took her hand. Lucia, I've lived in a world where most people love money. But you taught me that there's something more valuable. A sincere heart. He took out a small box. Inside was a diamond ring. Will you marry me? Lucia cried. She laughed. She nodded 1,000 times. Yes, I do. They were married 3 months later. It was a beautiful wedding in an outdoor garden. Tower employees, friends, and family attended. Everyone was celebrating the love that was born in the most unexpected place. During his speech, Mateo said something that stuck with everyone. Never judge someone by their job or their clothes. True wealth is in the soul. And I found the richest person in the world cleaning a floor. Lucia added, and I found the humblest man in the world pretending to be poor. We both learned that love knows no social class. The years passed. Mateo and Lucia started a family. They had 2 children. They lived in a house full of love, and they never forgot where they came from. Lucia continued working at the tower not because she needed the money, but because she loved helping other employees. She created training programs, educational scholarships, and emergency funds for workers in crisis. Mateo expanded his businesses but always maintained his philosophy, treating everyone with dignity. His companies became an example of labor justice. Meanwhile, Marquez, the former supervisor, ended up working in lower-level jobs. He never regained his position. His arrogance destroyed him. And Mrs. Cordero, a former human resources manager, had to apply for a job in the same tower years later. Lucia interviewed her personally, and against all odds, she gave her a second chance. Because Lucia learned that everyone deserves redemption. One autumn afternoon, Lucia and Mateo were walking through the park where they used to have lunch when they were just friends. Their children were playing nearby. "You know," Lucia said, "sometimes I still don't believe it." "What thing?" "That all this happened, that my life changed so much." Mateo kissed her forehead. "He changed because you deserved it." "No, it changed because you saw something in me that no one else saw. I only saw what was always there, and I hope others learn to see it the same way." Lucia smiled as she watched her children run happily. She thought of her mother, now recovered and living comfortably. Of her sister, Andrea, now studying medicine thanks to a scholarship. Of all the lives that changed because one day a billionaire decided to test the humanity of people, and she discovered that kindness exists, that true love doesn't see bank accounts, and that the best hearts are sometimes hidden behind cleaning uniforms. If you've made it this far and want to continue seeing inspiring stories, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that kindness is always rewarded. It was a cold December night in Buenos Aires. Christmas lights illuminated the downtown streets, but for Valentina, those lights only made the darkness more evident. She walked slowly along Corrientes Avenue, her 2-year-old son, Mateo, asleep in her arms, wrapped in a threadbare blanket she had found days earlier in a dumpster. Her feet were swollen, her lips chapped from the cold, and her stomach had been empty for more than 30 hours. But none of that mattered to her. The only thing that kept her going was her son's faint cry whenever he woke up hungry. She had tried to get help at soup kitchens, but they were all closed for the holidays. She had begged on street corners, but people passed by, preoccupied with their own celebrations. No one looked at her. No one saw her. She was invisible. That evening, as she walked past an elegant restaurant called El Mirador, the aroma of freshly cooked food stopped her in her tracks. She looked inside. The tables were full. Happy families, couples toasting, children laughing. Everything she had missed. She hugged Mateo to her chest and, without thinking twice, pushed open the glass door and walked in. The murmur of conversation stopped. Everyone looked at her. Valentina felt the weight of those stares, but she didn't back down. She approached the nearest table, where a man in his 50s, dressed in an impeccable suit, was silently finishing his dinner. He looked up, surprised. "Excuse me, sir," Valentina said in a trembling voice. Could you give me what you're going to leave on your plate? It's for my son. He hasn't eaten in 2 days." The man, whose name was Andres Valdez, looked at her without saying anything. Not with contempt, but with a mixture of confusion and something deeper. Then he looked at his plate, where more than half of a steak with mashed potatoes and salads still remained. The restaurant was still silent. Everyone was waiting for his answer. Some diners whispered among themselves, others took out their phones, perhaps to record the scene. But Andres paid no attention to any of it. Andres closed his eyes for a moment. In his mind, he saw something he hadn't seen in years. His wife's face, the face of his daughter, both dead in a car accident 5 years ago. That accident that left him alone, a millionaire, but empty. He remembered the last time he had dinner with them. He remembered his daughter's laughter, barely 7 years old, when she asked him to tell her a bedtime story. He remembered his wife Clara's look, full of love and complicity. And he remembered how all of that disappeared in a split second, one rainy night on the highway, when a truck lost control and crashed into their car. He wasn't with them that day. He had a business meeting, a meeting that now, years later, he couldn't even remember what it was about. For a long time, he blamed himself for not being there, for prioritizing work over his family, and now, standing in front of that woman with his son in her arms, he saw a second chance, a chance to do something that mattered. He opened his eyes and, without saying a word, took his plate and held it out to Valentina. She received it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you very much." Andres nodded slightly, but before she could leave, he spoke. "Wait." Valentina stopped. He took out his wallet, took out several bills, and handed them to her. "Buy yourself something, too, and find a safe place for tonight." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. She didn't know what to say. She only managed to murmur a "God bless you" before quickly leaving the place, clutching the plate as if it were gold. Andres sat motionless. The other customers returned to their conversations, but not him. Something inside him had moved, something that had been dormant for years. He asked for the bill, paid, and left the restaurant. Outside, the night was cold and the street was empty. Valentina was no longer in sight. Andres walked toward his car, a black Mercedes parked a few meters away. But before getting in, he glanced toward the corner, and there he saw her. Valentina was sitting on the ground, under an awning, giving small bites of food to Mateo, who ate desperately. She was smiling. Despite everything, she was smiling. She was gently wiping his mouth, whispering sweet nothings, stroking his hair. And in that moment, Andres saw something that moved him to his soul. The purest love that exists, that of a mother for her child. Andres felt a lump in his throat. He got into his car but didn't start the engine. He watched her from afar. He thought about his own life, his enormous empty house in Belgrano, with its 6 unused rooms, his tech company valued in the millions, his overflowing bank accounts, and how alone he was. That woman had nothing, but he had his son, and that, at that moment, seemed more valuable than anything he owned. She turned off the car's lights and waited. Valentina finished feeding Mateo, wrapped him back in the blanket, and started walking. Andres started the engine and followed slowly, keeping his distance. She walked several blocks, crossed a dark plaza where some homeless people slept on benches, and finally stopped in front of an abandoned building. The windows were broken, the walls covered in graffiti with protest slogans and spray-painted names. The front door was sealed with wooden planks, but there was a gap on one side where she carefully squeezed through, shielding Mateo with her body. Andres parked the car and waited a few minutes. Then he got out, walked toward the building, and carefully peered through a broken window on the first floor. What he saw took his breath away. Valentina and her son were sleeping on the floor of an empty room, on cardboard and old newspapers. There was no furniture. There was no light, only cold and silence. Mateo was coughing in his sleep. She hugged him tightly, as if his body were her only shield from the world. In one corner, there was a plastic bag with a few belongings, old clothes, a broken baby bottle, a dirty diaper. The walls were damp, and there were mold stains on the ceiling. The place smelled neglected. Andres backed away slowly, his heart heavy. He returned to his car, sat down, and for the first time in years, he cried. He cried for that woman. He cried for that child. He cried for his wife and daughter. And he cried for himself. But those tears weren't of sadness. They were of something else. They were of awakening. They were of realizing that he had been living like a ghost, surrounded by luxury but dead inside. And that, maybe, helping that woman and that child could give him back some humanity, could give him a purpose, a reason to keep going. The next morning, Andres arrived early at his office in Puerto Madero. He called his assistant, Lucia, and gave her a very specific set of instructions. "I need you to contact a moving team. I want them to prepare one of the apartments in the building in Recoleta, the one with 2 bedrooms and a view of the park. I want them to fully furnish it. A double bed, a crib for a toddler, a kitchen equipped with a refrigerator, oven, and microwave, bedding, towels, curtains, toys appropriate for a 2-year-old, diapers, powdered milk, food, everything necessary for someone to move in today and have everything they need." Lucia looked at him strangely. "For whom, sir?" "For someone in need," Andres replied firmly. "And I want it ready before 5 in the afternoon." Lucia nodded without asking any further questions. She knew her boss well enough to know when not to push. Besides, in all the years she had worked with him, she had never seen him so determined. That afternoon, Andres returned to the abandoned building. Valentina was outside, sitting on the ground, trying to calm Mateo, who was crying nonstop. She rocked him in her arms, whispering words the boy couldn't understand. His eyes were swollen from crying. His clothes were dirty and torn. Andres approached slowly. Valentina looked up, surprised to recognize him. You're the man from last night. Andres nodded. Yes. Can I talk to you for a moment? She looked at him suspiciously, but also curiously. Okay. Andres knelt in front of her, at her level. I don't want to scare you, he said calmly. I just want to help. Valentina frowned. You already helped me last night. You don't have to do anything else. I know, Andres replied. But I want to. Your son is sick. You have nowhere to live. And I have the means to change that. Valentina stared at him, trying to understand if what she was hearing was real. Why would you do that for me? You don't know me. What does you want in return? Andres lowered his gaze. Because 5 years ago, I lost my family. My wife and daughter died in an accident, and since then, I've lived alone, surrounded by things, but without anyone. Last night, when I saw you with your son, I saw something I no longer have: love, purpose, life. And I realized that if I can help, I must do it. Not for you, for me. Because I need to feel like my life still has meaning, and I don't want anything in return. I just want to help. Valentina felt a lump in her throat. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Andres replied. You just have to trust me. I have an apartment ready for you, with everything you need. I want you to go there with your son. Today. Valentina shook her head, incredulous. I can't accept this. It's too much. How do I know it's not a trap? How do I know I can trust you? Andres understood her fear. He handed her a business card. This is my number. You can call me whenever you want. And if at any point you feel it's not safe, you can leave. I'm not going to force you into anything. But please, at least let me try to help you. There was a long silence. Mateo stopped crying and stared at Andres with his big brown eyes. Finally, Valentina nodded. It's okay, but I want you to know that I'm not a thief. I'm not a bad person. I just had bad luck. Andres smiled tenderly. I know. Let's go. My car is nearby. Half an hour later, Valentina and Mateo were standing in front of a modern building in Recoleta. Andres opened the apartment door and invited them in. Valentina entered slowly, as if afraid of breaking something. What she saw left her speechless. The apartment was bright, clean, and beautiful. There was a living room with a comfortable gray sofa, a flat-screen TV, and a wooden dining table with 4 chairs. There was a fully equipped kitchen with a new refrigerator, oven, microwave, blender, and toaster. There was a bedroom with a new crib for Mateo, decorated with animal drawings on the walls, mobiles hanging from the ceiling, and a soft rug on the floor. Another bedroom had a large bed and white sheets that smelled of lavender, a spacious closet, and a window overlooking the park. On the kitchen table were bags of food: milk, bread, fruits, vegetables, rice, noodles, meat, chicken, oil, sugar, yerba mate, coffee, cookies. In the bathroom were cleaning products: shampoo, conditioner, soap, fluffy towels, toothpaste, toothbrushes. And in Mateo's room were toys, stuffed animals, building blocks, picture books, neatly folded new clothes in his size, diapers, wipes, baby cream, talcum powder. Everything was thought out. Everything was ready. It was as if someone had read her mind and prepared exactly what she needed. Valentina covered her mouth with her hands and began to cry. Andres stood in the doorway watching her silently. This is a dream, she said between sobs. It has to be a dream. It's not a dream, Andres replied. It's your new home, for as long as you need it. Valentina walked over to him and, without thinking, hugged him. Andres stood still at first, surprised, but then, slowly, he hugged her back. I don't know how to repay you for this, Valentina said. You don't have to pay me anything, Andres replied. Just take care of your son, and when you're ready, if you want, we can talk about how you can rebuild your life. But there's no rush. Take as much time as you need. If you made it this far, leave a comment telling me what you think about this story. The days passed. Valentina and Mateo settled into the apartment. For the first time in months, she was able to sleep in a bed. Mateo stopped coughing. He ate well. He smiled. He played with his new toys. Valentina cried every night, not from sadness anymore, but from gratitude. She couldn't believe someone had done something like that for her. A complete stranger. A man who didn't ask for anything in return. Every morning she woke up hoping it would all go away, that it was just a dream. But no. Andres visited them every few days, always with something new, fresh food, clothes, toys. But more than that, he brought company. He would sit in the living room and talk with Valentina for hours. She told him her whole story, how she'd gotten pregnant at 20 while still in college, how Mateo's father, her boyfriend of 2 years, abandoned her when he found out about the pregnancy. He told her he was too young to be a father, that he had plans, that he wasn't ready, and then he disappeared. He changed his number, moved out, blocked her from all social media. How her own family rejected her. Her father told her she'd dishonored the family. Her mother cried and begged her to give the baby up for adoption. But Valentina couldn't. She'd loved that baby from the moment she knew it existed, so she chose to keep it, even if it meant losing everything else. How she lost her job when her pregnancy began to show. She worked in a clothing store, and her boss told her that a pregnant woman didn't give a good image and fired her without severance pay. How she tried to get other jobs, but no one would hire a pregnant woman with no experience and no family to support her. And how, when Mateo was born, she ran out of money to pay the rent for the small room where she lived. The owner kicked her out, and so she ended up on the streets, alone, with a newborn baby. I felt invisible, Valentina said, her voice breaking. As if the world had erased me, as if I no longer mattered, as if I deserved to suffer. Andres listened to every word attentively, without interrupting, without judging, and in turn, he too began to open up. He told her about his wife, Clara, and how they had met at university. About his daughter, Sophia, who had inherited her mother's laughter and her love of books. About the accident that snatched them from his life on a rainy night. About the pain that consumed him for months, to the point that he considered ending his own life. And how for 5 years he had lived on autopilot, working 16 hours a day to avoid thinking, to avoid feeling, filling the void with projects and business ventures that meant nothing. Until that night at the restaurant. That night when a desperate mother asked him for help and something inside him awakened. One afternoon, while they were drinking coffee in the apartment's kitchen, Valentina asked him a question she'd wanted to ask for a long time. Why are you doing all this? Is it really just because you want to help? Or is there something more? Andres put his cup on the table and looked into her eyes. At first, yes, I just wanted to help. It felt like the right thing to do, but now I realize I'm also helping myself. You two gave me back something I'd lost. You gave me back a reason to get up every morning. You gave me back hope that I can still do something good in this world, that my life can still have meaning. Valentina smiled tenderly. You saved our lives. Literally. I don't know where we'd be now if it weren't for you. Mateo would probably be dead. And me too. I think it's only right that we do something for you too. Help you heal. Months passed. Andres helped Valentina get a job at one of his companies. She started as an administrative assistant in the human resources department, but quickly proved to be smart, responsible, and dedicated. She learned quickly, asked questions, and took initiative. Her colleagues appreciated her. Andres also hired a professional nanny to care for Mateo during the day and paid for quality daycare where the boy could learn, play, and socialize with other children his age. Valentina began to save money. Little by little, she began to feel that her life had meaning again, that she wasn't invisible, that she mattered, that she had a future. One Saturday afternoon, Andres arrived at the apartment with a large bag. Valentina opened the door, surprised. What's that? She asked. Something you should have had a long time ago, Andres replied with a smile. He took out a new, state-of-the-art cell phone, a modern laptop, and several books on business administration, personal finance, and professional development. If you want to progress, you need tools, he said. And I also enrolled Mateo in a comprehensive child health program. He's up to date on all his vaccinations, has monthly pediatrician appointments, and dental coverage. Valentina looked at him with moist eyes, I don't know how to thank you for everything you do for us. It's too much. Andres shook his head. It's not too much. It's what you deserve. And this makes me happy, happier than I've been in years. That night, Andres stayed for dinner. Valentina cooked homemade pasta with tomato sauce and basil. Matteo played on the floor with his toys, building towers with colorful cubes and knocking them down with laughter. And for the first time in a long time, Andres felt like he was in a home, not in an empty house, in a home full of life. While they ate, Valentina asked him something she'd wanted to ask for a long time. Did you ever think about starting a family again? Finding someone new? Andres was silent, chewing slowly. Then he answered honestly. I thought about it, but I always felt it would be betraying Clara and Sofia, as if I were replacing them, as if I were saying they didn't matter. Valentina looked at him seriously and warmly. I don't think they would have wanted you to live alone forever. I think they would have wanted to see you happy, to see you smile, to see you live. Andres smiled sadly. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to allow myself to be happy again. Another year passed. Valentina thrived at her job. She was promoted to Special Projects Coordinator with a salary that allowed her to live comfortably. Matteo grew up healthy and strong. He learned to walk, to run, to speak in complete sentences. He said, "Mom," all the time, and pointed to everything he saw with endless curiosity. He was a happy boy, full of energy. And Andres, little by little, began to truly heal. He no longer avoided photos of his family. He put them in frames in his house. He no longer cried every time he remembered Clara and Sofia. He smiled. He learned to honor their memory without getting caught up in the pain. And he learned that helping others was also a way to heal, to find purpose, to feel alive and connected to the world again. One day, Valentina asked Andres to accompany her to a special place. He agreed without question. She took him to a small park in the Palermo neighborhood where there was a lake with ducks. They sat on a bench, watching the children play. Matteo ran after the ducks, laughing and shouting with excitement. I want to tell you something important, Valentina said. Andres looked at her curiously. 2 years ago, I was a hopeless woman. I believed the world had forgotten me, that I deserved to suffer. But you showed me that kindness still exists, that there are still people willing to help without expecting anything in return. And because of that, I want to tell you that you didn't just change my life. You also changed the way I see the world. Now I believe things can get better, that it's worth trying, that it's worth moving forward. Andres felt a lump in his throat. I want to tell you something too, he replied. When I met you, I was lost. I had money, I had power, but I had no purpose. I lived, but I wasn't alive. And you gave it back to me. You and Matteo taught me that life goes on, that love goes on, and that there's always a reason to keep going, even when it seems like all is lost. You taught me that helping others is the best way to help yourself. Valentina took his hand. Thank you for everything, for saving me, for believing in me, for giving us a second chance. Andres squeezed her hand gently. Thank you, for letting me help you, for giving me back my life. 2 years later, Valentina had saved enough to move into her own apartment if she wanted, but she didn't want to leave. Not because she couldn't, but because that place wasn't just an apartment anymore. It was her home, and Andres was no longer just a distant benefactor. He was her friend, her family, the most important person in her life after Matteo. Matteo, now 6 years old, called him Uncle Andres and ran to hug him every time he saw him. And Andres couldn't have been happier every time he heard that word. It filled him with a joy he thought was lost forever. One summer afternoon, while the three of them were eating ice cream on the balcony watching the sunset, Matteo looked at Andres with his big, curious eyes and asked in his small voice, Uncle, are you my dad? Valentina froze, not knowing what to say. Andres looked at the boy, then at Valentina, and smiled tenderly. No, champ, your dad is someone else, but I love you like I was your dad, and I'll always be here for you. Matteo smiled contentedly and continued eating his chocolate ice cream, as if that answer was exactly what he needed to hear. Valentina looked at Andres with infinite gratitude, and in that moment, they both knew that, In some inexplicable and beautiful way, they had become family. Not by blood, but by something stronger, by love, by choice, by having decided to be there for each other when they needed it most. If this story moved you, subscribe for more stories that will make you reflect on what really matters.